Hi guys! So for this video, ang pag-uusapan natin is the alternative method for cubic spline interpolation. So actually, ito yung mas madaling approach sa pag-perform ng interpolation using cubic spline. So sige, i-discuss na natin siya. A more simplified way of obtaining the cubic spline function for every two consecutive points is equal to fi of x, tapos equal sa f double prime ng x minus 1 ng x sub I minus 1 all over 6, x sub I minus x sub I minus 1 times x sub I minus x cube plus f double prime ng x sub I all over 6 times the quantity x sub I minus x sub I minus 1, then the quantity x minus x sub I minus 1 cube, and plus f of x sub I minus 1 all over x sub I minus x sub I minus 1 minus f double prime x sub I minus 1 times x sub I minus x sub I minus 1 all over 6 times x sub I minus x. So, ayun, medyo nagsasawa ka na sa maraming subscript. But, pagtyagaan na natin to kasi ihamak na mas madali ito doon sa una. And lastly pala, nakalimutan kong basahin, plus f of x sub I all over x sub I minus x sub I minus 1 minus f double prime of x sub I, f sub x sub I minus x sub I minus 1 all over 6, then times x minus x sub I minus 1. So, dito, usually, mga given na to class, no? Mahahanap mo itong x sub I, lahat yan mahahanap mo yung values na yan. Kasi, di ba, usually ang given is x and f of x. So, halimbawa, kung 4 na points, x sub 0, f of x sub 0, x sub 1, then f of x sub 1, x sub 2, f of x sub 2. Hindi ko na maisulat pero x sub 3, then f of x sub 3. So, given lang yan. The only thing na unknown lang dito, yung kailangan yung hanapin is yung mga second derivative. Okay? Halimbawa, ito. Hahanapin natin yan. Ito rin, hahanapin natin yan. So, as this one, kasi second derivative siya, and this one. So, paano natin hahanapin yung value ng mga second derivative? So, as I said nga, the only unknown of the mentioned equation are the second derivatives. This can be solved using the linear system derived from the formula below. So, ito yung ating formula. And sa ngayon, mukha man siyang complicated tingnan, pero once we apply an example, or we apply this one to an example, so mas maintindihan nyo siya. Okay? So, ang goal dito is makakahanap ka ng linear system. So, ayun, babalik ka na naman sa linear system para mahanap nyo yung mga values ng second derivative. So, note that the second derivative at the endpoints ay 0. So, di ba ito yung step 4 ng cubic spline? So, yung second derivative noong x sub 0 and yung second derivative ng x sub n is equal to 0. So, unlike the conventional method of cubic spline interpolation where there is a need of 4n linear equation for n plus 1 pairs of data, so this method needs to solve n minus 1 equation, making it easier to calculate both by hands and by computer. So, halimbawa, mas marami daw tong mas madali daw to dahil mas konti yung linear equations na iso-solve natin. So, for instance, meron tayong 4 points. 'Di ba? Kung meron tayong 4 points katulad doon sa given natin x and f of x, meron tayong x sub 0, f of x sub 0, x sub 1, f of x sub 1, x sub 2, f of x sub 2, and x sub 3 over f of x sub e. Sa traditional spline, kung maalala nyo sa previous example natin, ang na-solve natin or ang kailangan nating isolve is 12 equations, 12 unknown. Nagkamali kasi ako ng spelling. So, dito, 12 equations. Ngayon, for the alternative method, from 12 equation, ang isosolve nyo na lang dito class ay 2 equations. Yes, from 12 to 2. So, mas madaling isolve ang dalawang equations. Paano yon? Kasi usually, ang concern lang naman natin is yung mga second derivative. So, halimbawa, f double prime of x sub 0, f double prime of x sub 1, f double prime ng x sub 2, and f double prime ng x sub 3. So, yung unang dalawa or itong dalawang tigsaduluhan 0 kasi nga note that the second derivative of the curve sa dalawang endpoints ay 0. So ito na lang yung mga unknowns natin. So yung f double prime at x sub 1, syempre yun yung point na x sub 1, f of x sub 1, tapos x sub 2, f of x sub 2. So ito na lang yung isosolve natin. So 'di ba? From 12 equations, dalawa na lang. Kaya nga mas madali itong i-compute by hand. So, ito yung kagandahan ng alternate method. And again, uulitin ko, paano natin ito masosolve? Magde-derive ka ng linear equation using this function. So, tandaan nyo kasi later on, gagamitin natin to. Okay? Tandaan nyo tong dalawang formula is a must. Kung i-memorize nyo siya, much better. So, sige, to illustrate the use of the alternate method, let's solve this example. According dito, determine the value of f of 7 for a given set of data below using the alternative method for cubic spline interpolation. So, of course, for notation, x sub 0, x sub 1, x sub 2, and x sub 3. So, ito yung f of x sub 0, f of x sub 1, f of x sub 2, and f of x sub 3. Okay? So, same problem lang naman to isosolve. So, solution. So, again, the notation for the given data is shown below. So, ayan na siya. Wala na tayong problema. Sinulat ko na to kanina. So, ngayon, since the data provides 4 pairs of function, so, mangangailangan tayo ng 3 cubic spline. So, di ba nga, as I said, kapag may 4 na points nung graph natin to, so, usually, pag kinonect mo, unang spline, pangalawang spline, and pangatlong spline. Okay? So, kasi nga, di ba, for every 2 consecutive point, may isang spline dyan. So, halimbawa, f1 of x, tapos ito, f2 of x, and f3 of x. Basta alam natin na yung f1 of x, hindi pa natin alam yung function, pero sigurado ka na yung f1 of x class ay naka-range na 1 to 5, di ba? So, therefore, this is from 1 to 5. Yung f2 of x is naka-range ng 5 to 8. And yung f3 of x is naka-range ng 8 to 10. Okay? So, again, since the data provides 4 pairs of function, 3 cubic splines are needed. So, solve for the second derivative f prime x sub 1 and f double prime x sub 1 and f double prime x sub 2. Again, given daw na yung f double prime x sub 0 and yung f double prime x sub 3 is equal to 0. So, isulat ko nga siya, no? X sub 0 is equal to 0. F double prime x sub 1 is equal to unknown. F double prime ng x sub 2 as unknown din. Tapos, f double prime x sub 3 is 0. So, yun na nga, dalawang linear equation lang yung kailangan nyo dito para ma-solve ito. So, paano natin may establish yung unang linear system? Ang gagamitin natin dito, class, na point is yung x sub 1, y sub 1, or x sub 1, f of x sub 1, which is 5, negative 26, di ba? So, ito yung ating unang point dyan. And kung titingnan natin, wait lang balikan ko siya. So, x sub 1 minus x sub 0. So, in that case, so, ito yung formula natin. X sub I, yung I natin dito, class, lahat yan, 1. Ulitin ko, yung I ngayon ay equal sa 1. Kaya, kung papansin ninyo ngayon, so, x sub 1 minus f prime or f double prime ng 1 minus 1 which is 0. So, tandaan nyo na yung I dito is equal to 1. Kaya ito, x sub 0, then f double prime x sub 1 minus 1. So, f double prime ng x sub 0. So, tama ba siya? So, yes. Tapos, balik tayo dito to the quantity x sub I plus 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. minus x, 1 minus 1, 1 minus 1 is 0. So, dapat dito, x sub 2 minus x sub 0. So, yun siya. 2x sub 2 minus x sub 0. So, nakukuha nyo. And f double prime ng f sub I, di ba? F double prime ng x sub 1 plus dito, x sub 2 minus x sub 1, f double prime ng x sub 2. So, that is equal to 6 all over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. The quantity f of x sub 2, f of x sub 2 minus f of x sub 1 plus 6 of x sub 1 minus x sub 0 siya, f of x sub 0 minus f of x sub 1. So, ito po ang kalalabasan sa function natin. Okay, so erase ko lang siya. So, ito na yun, no? Basta isipin nyo muna na yung unang linear system, in-establish natin dito na yung I is equal to 1 tapos sinubstitute ko. And kapag babalikan natin to, do not forget this one. Ito na yung x sub 0, x sub 1, x sub 2, x sub 3, f of x sub 0, f of x sub 1, f of x sub 2, and f of f sub 3. Sinubstitute ko na siya dito ngayon. Halimbawa, yung x sub 1 is 5, x sub 0 is 1. So, as I said, yung f double prime nga ng f sub 0 is 0, di ba? F double prime ng f sub 0 is 0. F double prime ng x sub 1 is unknown. F double prime ng x sub 2 is unknown. And f double prime ng x sub 3 is 0. So, dito, automatic, 0 na siya. Plus 2, ang x sub 2 is 8, ang x sub 0 is 1. F double prime ng x sub 1, unknown siya. And plus 8 minus 5 kasi x sub 2 is 8, x sub 1 is 5. F double prime ng x sub 2, so unknown din siya. That is equal to, yun nga, 6 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1, which is 8 minus 5. The quantity, yung f of x sub 2 is negative 14 minus negative 26, then plus 6 over x sub 1 is 5, x sub 0 is 1. So, the quantity 12 minus negative 26. If we are going to rearrange that, ang kalalabasan, 14f double prime x sub 1 plus 3f double prime x sub 2 is equal to 81. So, ito na yung ating equation 1. So, ganun lang yung pag-establish ng equation 1. So, next tayo is para ma-establish mo yung ating second linear system. So, ito lang siya. This time, ginawa natin na yung I is equal to 2. So, this time, x sub 2 minus x sub 1. I think kailangan ko ulit siyang i-discuss. So, kung gagamitin mo itong same formula na to, dapat yung I ngayon ay 2. So, x sub 2 minus x sub 1, f double prime ng x sub 1 plus 2, x sub 3 kasi I plus 1 is 2 plus 1 is 3, minus x sub 1, f double prime ng x sub 2, plus x sub 3 minus x sub 2, f double prime ng x sub 3. So, yun lang naman yung concept doon. Okay? So, balik ko na lang dito sa slide. So, ito siya guys. So, sinubstitute ko na. All you need to do is to substitute the values like x sub 2 is 8, x sub 1 is 5. So, yung f double prime ng x sub 1 is unknown. Tapos, minus 2, 10 minus 5. F double prime ng x sub 2 is unknown. Plus 10 minus 8. Take note na yung f double prime o yung second derivative, ito, ay equal siya sa 0, di ba? Kasi nga, ang unknown lang is yung f double prime x sub 1 and yung f double prime x sub 2. So, 0 siya. And that is equal to 6. Then, 10 minus 8, 37 minus negative 14 plus 6 all over 8 minus 5 times negative 26 minus negative 14. So, therefore, ang second linear function natin ay 3f double prime ng x sub 1 plus 10 double prime ng x sub 2 is equal to 129. So, yun lang naman yung dalawang linear function na kailangan natin. So, now, solve for the values of f double prime x sub 1 and f double prime x sub 2. So, ito na siya. You can just use your own calculator. So, for instance, let me show my calculator. May calculator kasi ako dito. So, yung unang equation, mode 5.1, kung familiar kayo dito, 14, 3, 81. Tapos, for the second equation, let's move to the second slide. So, that is 3. Ito siya, 3, 10, tapos 129. So, oops, sorry. Sorry. Mali. 3, 10, 129. So, ang sagot natin, yung f sub 1 is 3.22. Tingnan natin for the ano. So, ito yung ating slide. 3.2290076 and yung f double prime x sub 2 is equal to 11.9312977. So, ayan. Using the calculator. Or, pwede nyo naman siyang manu-manuhin. So, ngayon, for this problem, only the second cubic spline is necessary kasi yung 7 is between 5 and 8. Okay, so kasi nga, katulad nung nasabi ko, tatlo ang spline dito, F1 ng X, which is from 1 to 5. Tapos, yung F2 ng X, which is from 5 to 8. And yung F3 ng X, which is from 8 to 10. Diba? So, alam naman natin na yung 7 is nasa gitna ni 5 and 8. So, yun na nga, katulad dong last video natin, yung conventional method of the cubic spline, ang gagamitin natin is yung second spline dahil yung 7 is between 5 and 8. So, ngayon, saan galing tong formula na to? Ang tanong ko sa inyo is saan galing to? Balikan ulit natin yung discussion natin dito. So, itong mahaba na formula na to, which is i-delete ko na lang. So, sabi natin, ang concern natin ngayon is yung f of f sub 2, right? Dahil second spline ang hahanapin natin. F2x. So, therefore, itong I is equal to 2 dito. Ang ginawa ko lang, so f double prime, 2 minus 1 is 1 all over 6. Tapos, x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Basta ang point ko lang, kung isa-substitute nyo yung lahat ng I, so mahahanap mo, halimbawa ito, f double prime of x sub 1, 6, tapos, x sub 2 minus x sub 1, the quantity x sub 2, minus x cube plus f double prime ng x sub 2 all over 6 the quantity x sub I or x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Okay, then the quantity x minus x sub 1 cube plus this thing. So, kumbaga, I hope nasusundan nyo yung pattern natin. So, let's proceed. Ito na lang yung ating ano. So, ito na yon. So, f2x is equal to this function. So, ngayon, ang gagawin nyo na lang, do not forget na isa-substitute lang natin na yung f double prime x sub 1 is ito siya, 3.2290076 all over 6. Yung x sub 2 is 8, yung x sub 1 is 5. Times the quantity 8 minus x. So, yung x, hayaan muna natin siya as a variable. So, cube plus 11.931299 kasi yung f double prime x sub 2 is 11.931297 all over 6 tapos 8 minus 5. The quantity, x minus x sub 1 or x minus 5 cube. Plus, yung f of x sub 1, as you can see, that is negative 26 all over 8 minus 5 minus yung f double prime ng x sub 1 is 3.2290076. Then x sub 2 is 8, x sub 1 is 5 all over 6. Then x sub 2 is 8, so 8 minus x plus yung ating f of x sub 2 is negative 14 all over x sub 2 which is 8, x sub 1 is 5, so 8 minus 5 minus f double prime ng x sub 2 is itong 11.9312977, 8 minus 5, okay? So, kasi x sub 2 minus x sub 1 all over 6, the quantity x minus 5. So, ito na yung ating spline function, okay? And ang gagawin mo lang is i-substitute mo lang yung 7. Okay? Kasi yung concern natin, sige, later on na lang. But for the meantime, isimplify nyo muna pala lahat yung numerical calculation. So, f sub 2x is 0.1793893. Ito, pag kinompute mo siya, ayan siya. Then, 8 minus x cube plus 0.6628499 tapos x minus 5 cube minus 10.281175 ng 8 minus x minus 10.6323155 ng x minus 5. So, for the last time, ang gusto natin mahanap is yung value ng f of 7. So, just substitute x is equal to 7 Tapos, mahahanap nyo na yung sagot natin na negative 26.063613. Okay, so I hope let the calculator na lang do the work for this one and sana nasusundan nyo ito. So, thank you so much for listening and I hope this lesson gives clarity sa topic natin na alternative method for cubic spline interpolation. So, ingat!